I want to show you how to do some basic pressure conversions, and there are a couple reasons for that. Having to do most with pressure is that there are a bunch of different units measured or that we use to measure pressure. Maybe the most common one that you see is the kilopascal, but there's also the pascal. Kilopascal is just 1,000 pascals. But we also see units called atmospheres. So 1 atmosphere is the pressure is brought down on you because of the atmosphere. And that's equal to 101,000 pascal or 101 kilopascal. We also use something called millimeters of mercury. That is, tall of a column of mercury could be created from the pressure. And in the case of this, 1 atmosphere is 760 millimeters of that. We can also say 14.696 psi, that's pounds per square inch, so that's how much force is on every square inch. And if you're wondering what a square, take your knuckle, that's about 1 inch, so imagine a square that is one of those on each side, and 14 pounds of pressure, or 14 pounds of force rather, pushing down on the middle of that. So all of these numbers are equivalent. 1 atmosphere is the same thing as 101 pascal, or 101,000 pascal. It's the same thing as 101 kilopascal, yada yada. There's tons of different ways to measure pressure. Second, and this is maybe more important, is that the technique that I'm about to show you is one of the most dead useful mathematical techniques that you will likely learn in high school. It's a process called unit analysis, or more generally, dimensional analysis. So that's the big takeaway lesson. We'll spend a lot more time on dimensional analysis later, but this is a nice place to get a first introduction to it. So let's look at problem 1. I want to convert 2 atmospheres to psi. Now in your head you're probably saying this is not that hard, because it's really not, because we already know that 1 atmosphere is 14.696 psi, so 2 atmosphere would be twice that much. There's a way to set this up, however, so that when it gets ugly and things aren't as simple as all that, you can still figure this out. So here's what you do. Take whatever it is you're starting with, and you just write that down. So I'm starting with 2 atmospheres. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write a fraction next to this, and this fraction we call a conversion factor. So I put it in parentheses to show that we're multiplying these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever unit I have in what I started with. I started with units of atmosphere. At the bottom of my fraction, I want units of atmosphere. And I'm trying to change it to psi. So at the top, I want units of psi. And now the trick is that whatever numbers I put in here, because I am going to fill in some numbers beside these numbers have to be equivalent. That is, whatever number I put in for atmospheres, I need an equivalent number of psi. Well, we already know that 1 atmosphere is the same thing as 14.696 psi. So what I've done is I've created a fraction that is basically equal to 1. 14.696 psi is the same thing as 1 atmosphere. So this fraction is really equal to 1, and anytime I multiply something by 1, I'm not changing what it is. So I'm not changing my 2 atmospheres into anything new, I'm just changing its form. And now I'm left with this, and it's basically just a math problem. I can ignore the units, we'll talk about what happens with them in a second, and just work this as if it was 2 times the fraction 14.696 over 1. Now, I think the easiest way to get a hold of this doing it the first time is to remember that when you're multiplying fractions, you just multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and it is what it is. The 2 atmosphere that you start with, you consider that to be part of the numerator. It is on top. So we start by saying 2 times 14.696. So the top part of my fraction is 29.392. The bottom part of my fraction, I don't have anything down here, so I can ignore that. All I've got is a 1, so it is just a 1. So I've multiplied across the top, multiply it across the bottom. In this case, there was just one thing, so it doesn't matter. So I just copy over my number. And 29.392 divided by 1, I hope you don't need a calculator for that. It's 29.392. And now we have to figure out what the units are. This is where it gets cool. Anytime you have the same thing on the top part and the bottom part of a fraction, they cancel each other out. Atmosphere here is in the top, and here is in the bottom. These will cancel and go away. The only unit I'm left with is PSI. And so I've now successfully converted 2 atmospheres to PSI. My answer, notice the units take care of themselves and the number takes care of itself. So 2 atmospheres is equal to 29.392 PSI. Let's take another look at that with this one, which will be nicely more complicated. Again, I start with whatever I'm given, 19.62 Pascal. And I'm going to convert this now to millimeters of mercury. So remember, whatever unit I have in the top, I want that in the bottom. Whatever unit I want to change to goes in the top. And these two have to be equivalent. So I can look back up at my list, and I say that 101,325 Pascal is equal to 760 millimeters of mercury. So I multiply across the top part, that times that. 19.62 times, I should really enter in all the numbers into the calculator. 19.62 times 760. 14,911.2. And of course, along the bottom, I only have one number. And if I'm really going to be honest with myself, we should really be doing sig figs here. But for now, until we get the hang of it, 101,325. So again, all I'm doing is, now that I have these, divide those. So 14,911.2 divided by 101,325, and I get 0.1472. And again, my units, pascals, will cancel, and I'm left with just millimeters of mercury. And so that is basic conversions. Again, all you're doing is you're lining these up, creating a conversion factor, canceling units, and multiplying across to find the number.